welcome to my world. I am Hichory, and just to be clear, I'm not Hichory, I'm grassy beans. And just to make sure you understand this concept, grassy beans is not Hichory, I am Hichory. And Hichory is not grassy beans, because I am grassy beans. And I am not Hichory, let no one dispute that. Welcome to episode 11, I am Hichory. In this episode, I'm going to say words about me, my world here, and some other things in general. Nothing in particular, but I do hope to fill in some of the gaps that have been left previously. Firstly, look at my domain. You must love it. And if you don't love it, then your mum is clearly a purveyor of violated conjugal depravity. Work that one out if you can. And then, love my domain, like I told you to. I have made it toxically enticing, haven't I? No, I mean, it gets better yet. This isn't the finish of it. It's like I said in some other episode somewhere, you've always got to be upgrading. Aesthetics are one thing, but I go more for practicality. If it doesn't have a purpose, then why clutter the place up with it? So says Hichory. Running along to do some significant stuff now. We'll see what that is when I get there. I never plan these things too far in advance, but it's bound to be exceptional. That's just the way that I do things around here. Well, it's the way that I tell you I do things anyway. And this is why I don't plan things. The annoying unpredictability of Skaken materialization. And this gives me the perfect opportunity to chew your ear about why my game has Skaken and your game is boring. Just as soon as I finish off this loping, lean-legged lava lamp coming. Oh, wow. Extreme. Okay, to start with, I am Hichory, and this is the story of the Skaken. It started long before I was born. There were 4 famous scientists. They became known as the Free Radical Scientists, and they established the 4 original clans after the conflagration events. These scientists were responsible for a number of world-changing discoveries, the first of which was the integration of the free radical ideals into society. This was a movement that slowly gained popularity over the following years. Their next greatest discovery was the quantum computing nodes, followed closely by the bionomites and the S-plasma. But probably their most profound discovery was that of the temporal swing and the invention of the temporal swing equipment. I'll get into more detail on that shortly. Right now I'm working my way around to explaining the Skaken effect, which is the essential cause of those that I refer to as the Skaken, or the Skarks. Yeah, this pile of bludgers here. Anyway, it starts with the S-plasma and the QCNs, quantum computing nodes. Because if you'll recall from episode 8, the S-plasma is essentially an amino acid soup of the QCNs. But before I get into that explanation, I first want to explain that I am Hichory. And before I was dropped into this post-war epoch, where I come from, there are no Skaken. In my time, the Skaken effect is just a theory. But that theory is how I know what these afflicted aberrations are. And the fact that I recognize some of them as friends and family verifies to me that this is indeed the result of the Skaken effect. And this is how the theory works. The QCNs are the heart of the system, and they're programmed with a blueprint of perfect health. When you're injured, your body is normally capable of fighting bacteria and repairing damage all on its own. So the QCNs aren't actually needed at this point, so they remain dormant in the brain. This idle state is known as Protocol 0. In this state, their programming tells them to do nothing other than monitor life signs. This is their default state, and they will remain in Protocol 0 until they are summoned. There are only 2 ways that QCNs can be summoned. One is by conscious decision, and the other I'll cover later. Once they are summoned, the QCNs then work in tandem with the body's own defense and repair network. They move around the body via electrical conductivity, so they can relocate anywhere in less than a nanosecond. Each node then summons and gathers legions of the body's defense mechanisms, T cells, B cells, macrophages, neutrophils, etc., etc. And these are then the bionomites. Each bionomite consists of a QCN at the helm of a multitude of the body's own defense cells. The bionomites under the control of the QCNs take charge of the entire system, coordinating, streamlining and expediting every facet of the defense system. Each QCN is of course directly connected to the Akashic data, where the blueprint of perfect health resides. It's still your body's own defense system, but it's like it's on steroids. At this stage, the QCNs have built microscopic bionanomites, or BNIs, from the body's own defense network, and they are now executing Protocol 1, Stabilize Optimum Health. The BNIs improve the quality and the speed of the healing process. They're not miracle workers in this respect. They just improve the body's own ability to heal. So if you break a leg, for instance, it's not going to heal unless you splint it. But when it does heal, it does so quicker and stronger than normal healing. That is how the quantum computing nodes work under normal circumstances. For the Skarkan, however, the QCNs are not working as normal. The theory states that if the body is subject to a large and powerful enough disruptive force, a neutron star for example, or the sun, then the quantum computing nodes may become dysfunctional. The prime directive of the QCNs is that of life, survive. Therefore, the operating protocols are based on that mandate. General life conditions usually engage only the first two protocols, 0 being idle and 1 being stabilize optimum health. However, if the body is faced with a potentially fatal situation, the QCNs will continue to execute Protocol 1 until the body reaches imminent death status. It's at this point that Protocol 2 is engaged, Preserve Life. The QCNs firstly activate in the brain, where they take full control of all mental and physical bodily functions. The heart rate is put on pause and the subject is placed into a comatose state. This state can be maintained for some time. However, immediately following the induction of the coma, the third protocol is engaged, Withdraw. And this is one of the most miraculous qualities of the QCNs. There are actually 3 stages to Protocol 3. Stage 1, Remove, Stage 2, Relocate, and Stage 3, Reconstitute. In the first stage, the QCNs distribute their total numbers body-wide. At a point just before body death, just as the coma is induced, they then generate and release a powerful bioelectromagnetic pulse. This pulse causes the electrostatic bonds of every molecule in the body to instantaneously release, and the physical body dematerializes, which means that the body, for all intents and purposes, no longer physically exists at that location in space. It has been removed. However, the body's residual energy field remains, so for the next few seconds it looks like the body is still there, but it no longer has substance. This person now has what is known as a localized temporal existence. And now the second stage of Protocol 3 comes into play. Relocate. The QCNs naturally follow the electromagnetic pathways of the temporal swing to the predetermined safe zone, or the bed base, that place where the person intentionally placed the bedroll as their established safe zone. A quick digression here. I want you to take a look at the symbol I've just put on the left over there. I have heard it suggested that this symbol indicates that you've been radiated by having been hit by a Skarkan. That's wrong. This is actually a biohazard symbol. It simply means that you have an open wound or the like, and that infection will enter if you don't receive treatment. This is the radiation symbol. It's completely different. This one is simply biohazard, nothing to do with radiation whatsoever. Okay, so at this stage, I'm still explaining how the QCNs, bionites and S-plasma work. Once I've explained that, then I'll go on and divulge how the Skarkan effect manifests. Now, I was about to describe the second stage of Protocol 3, the relocation. But first, in episode 1, I made a point of telling you that there was a good, sound reason for placing the bedroll other than just being game logic. This explanation of the third protocol will give you that reason. Once the QCNs have placed the body into a coma, it falls lifelessly to the ground. But at this stage, it has no substance, so the skarks grovel around on the ground trying to find your corpse. And the reason they won't find you is because your atoms have been dispersed by the QCNs into a temporal existence. Now, this is probably something they've never taught you at school. If you have a localized temporal existence, it means that you actually exist everywhere at once. The word localized in this reference is referring to the finite nature of your physical structure, your body. And now, just to make this a little more complicated than is probably necessary, that statement about the finite nature of your physical structure also alludes to the word intramural of the S plasma, systemic, nano, bioreciprocating intramural plasma. Go back to episode 2 for that reference. When you place your bedroll somewhere in the game world, the QCNs record that action as an act of intent. An act of intent has special meaning to the QCNs, and that'll be a talk for another time. I'll describe the difference between an intentional act and a responsive act. There's a universe of difference to a QCN, but not right now. And now to explain the Skarkan effect. And I'm going to repeat myself here because it's necessary. Theory states that if the body is subject to a large and powerful enough disruptive force, some of the QCNs may become dysfunctional. In order for the Skarkan effect to occur, more than 50% of the QCNs need to be dysfunctional, because if there are more good ones than bad ones, then the bad ones will just be expelled from the body and everything goes back to normal, in which case you'll need a booster shot of S plasma. Now, if the opposite is the case, then the good ones are forced to engage in a life and death battle that they simply cannot win. And that is the essence of the Skarkan effect. And now I'm going to work my way through the Skarkan acronym and detail how each word fits into the anatomy of the definition of Skarkan: systemic, constitutional, arterial rupture and kinetogenic infection necrosis. Skarkan. I said earlier that the QCNs were the heart of the system. Now, in the Skarkan, because they're dysfunctional, they're the heart of the problem. So because the QCNs are dispersed throughout the entire body, the problem is systemic, the first word in the acronym. The QCN's predominant function is to maintain and bolster constitutional resilience against the toxic post-war existence. So when they stop functioning properly, the body's constitutional failure begins. And this is how that happens. When the QCNs were damaged by the powerful disruptive force, the strong atomic force at the nucleus of the QCNs is disrupted. So what was a life-preserving quantum computing node reverts back to its original state of radioactivity, which makes it an anti-QCN. And because there is a percentage of the QCNs still operating, these anti-QCNs are targeted for removal from the body. This is now an out-of-control system. The good QCNs are attacking the bad ones, and the bad QCNs are attacking the good ones. The body becomes a battlefield. And this manifests in the victim as constitutional arterial rupture. The word kinetogenic means producing motion, and although the person is technically dead, the QCN's stimulation of the basal ganglia gives the otherwise dead body the ability to move. So that's one part of the kinetogenic component of the acronym, but there's another one yet. Because the amino acid that hosted the precious life-preserving S plasma has become toxic and is being spread around the body like a disease, it's referred to as a kinetogenic infection, a spreading disease. There is no coming back from the Skarkan effect. It is a one-way, high-speed transition to death, and the blood and the death are oozing from the flesh while the corpse staggers round in a state of advanced anatomical necrosis. Now, what's with these assholes filing in like there's some sort of a soup kitchen here? Actually, I think I'll shut the fuck up for a bit now, and let's get loud. Back to business. So I just told you how the moving corpse was staggering around in a state of advanced anatomical necrosis. which naturally concludes the only word that can fit at the end of this acronym is necrosis. And there you have the Skarkan effect defined. Systemic constitutional arterial rupture and kinetogenic infection necrosis. And I've just done splendidly explaining all that. I'm sure you have a very clear and concise understanding of all the things now. The Skarkan effect lasts until the dysfunctional bionites have all been expelled and the corpse falls in a heap of putrid rotting flesh. You can also just bludgeon them to death. Although it's good and really gratifying to score a nice clean headshot, it's not an essential. That's only a thing when you have a zombie infestation. These are not zombies, they are Skarkan. And they shouldn't exist. We're all taught that the S-plasma is 100% safe, and that nothing can go wrong with this technology. We are at the same time also told of the Skarkan effect, but that it is an impossibility and is therefore only a theory. According to the theory, there is no force on Earth capable of disrupting the QCNs. So either the theory is wrong, or there has been a force from somewhere else that did this. Because here, the Skarkan are real, and they just keep coming. And the worst part is, I can't go back to my home and warn anyone, because I'm Hichory. And whatever happened to drop me in this place where the Skarkan are a reality could happen to someone else from my time. It's a constant worry, and in fact, I'm pretty sure it's happening regularly, because some of the people I'm seeing here as Skarkan have definitely come from my home. But why do they keep showing up again and again? There's only one of me here, so why am I not Skarkan? I can't answer these questions because I'm Hichory, but I'm pretty sure grassybeans can, so you'll have to wait until I'm finished talking to get your answers. But I'm getting a bit off track now. It occurs to me I didn't finish explaining about the functionality of the QCNs. I only told you up to a point where I could give you a satisfactory account of the Skarkan effect, and that's all done. So I was up to Protocol 3 and getting round to talking about the third stage of Protocol 3. Remember the 3 stages: Stage 1, remove; Stage 2, relocate; and Stage 3, reconstitute. Protocol 3 is also known as a bioreciprocal event, which I spoke about in Episode 2. This video describes the functionality of that event. Stage 1, the removal, occurs when the QCNs release your atoms into the temporal dimension. Stage 2, relocate, is when the QCNs travel along the energy grid of the temporal swing to the bed base, and more on that later. And now I'll cover Stage 3, the reconstitution. And this is another thing that you won't have learned at school. In the temporal dimension, time and space don't exist. Or you could look at it from the other perspective. All time and space exist at once. So when I tell you that the QCNs travel to your bed base, the fact of the matter is, once in the temporal dimension, they are already there. And so also is your physical and emotional being. At the physical coordinates of your bed base, the QCNs now emit a bioelectromagnetic wave. The first time they emitted a pulse, this is a wave. All of the atoms of your physical being are tuned precisely to this wave and are now drawn together and reconstituted in a perfectly healthy form on the bed base. But that's just your body. In Episode 2, I told you that in any teleportation event there are 2 parts. The first part is your body restored to optimum health on the bed, but then there is the part that is you. Some will call it the soul, some the spirit or the personality. It goes by a number of names. But the overriding fact is that if this essence that is you is not somehow contained within the teleportation event, what arrives at the bed is a perfectly healthy corpse. Life must be reinstalled, but life is not a physical thing made out of atoms like your body. Your life force exists as a purest form of energy. Not light energy, not heat energy, not electrical or even electromagnetic energy. The stuff that is you is difficult to justifiably describe. It is an energy. It could be described as the purest, most unaffected form of energetic tenderness. You would feel it as pure emotion, but only that emotion that we know as love. And it exists at a different level to the physical, but is teleported in the same temporal event as your body. And this is one of the quantum computing node's other miraculous qualities, and that is the ability to contain, commute, and reinstate the essence of life. But the real question is, how the fuck? Well, if you'll recall from episode 8, Scientific Talk, I explained how the catricite, which is part of the QCNs, was directly connected to the Akashic data. And in episode 5, S-Plasma 101, I explained what the Akashic data is. Well, the quantum computing nodes are the embodiment of that state of being. Your life force exists as an integral element of the Akashic data, that fundamental pre-existing universal intelligence. You are, quite literally, a child of the universe.
You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should.
Oh, I love that song. I don't really care if you don't. It's a really good song. It's called The Desiderata by Les Crane. It was really popular in the early 1970s. The lyrics are actually taken from a script that was found in a church in Baltimore in 1692. And yes, we still listen to it in the 2080s. It contains a lot of profound wisdom that is still applicable no matter what era you're from. But all in all, I feel like I've given you a pretty good rough description of how the teleportation works. At home we use this teleportation capacity of the QCNs to travel from clan to clan. The difference is we boost the signal using the temporal swing equipment which was invented by the free radical scientists. This boosted signal means that you can carry a lot more equipment with you. When the teleportation is initiated by the QCNs alone, as in a bioreciprocal event, the signal isn't strong enough to transport the backpack, so it remains at the spot where Protocol 3 was initiated. Everything else travels with you to the bed base. Now at this point, I just want to emphasize how important it is to watch all of my videos in sequence, because after episode 1, every subsequent video builds on topics and ideas that reference previous videos. So if you don't watch them all in order, then nothing is going to make any sense to you. And you know, it's only because I love you so much that I want you to be with me along this entire unfolding quest of discovery. It's our quest. The quest to find the truth of how the 7 Days to Die microcosm evolved from this world that you and I are experiencing right now. And now with that said, it's time for me to talk about the difference between an intentional thought and a responsive thought. And I'm talking here about any person who has had S-plasma infusion. When the QCNs are injected as the S-plasma, they remain predominantly dormant in the brain until one of two things happens. Earlier in this video, I said there were only two ways that the QCNs can be summoned. One is by conscious decision, which is the action of using the first aid kit, which is also known as a BNI protocol modification. I've mentioned that in earlier videos as well. Using the first aid kit in this way is actually telling the QCNs not to execute Protocol 2 and 3, but to do Protocol 1 instead, stabilize optimum health. And if you can do this before your body reaches terminal point, then your health will be restored and you can go on to fight your battle of survival. That is what is going on as a result of having performed an intentional thought. That thought was to use the first aid kit. That thought carried intent because something happened as a result of you having that thought. You actually used the first aid kit. If you had just thought about using the first aid kit and didn't actually do it, then that is a responsive thought. It's a thought that you had in response to something. Something like almost dying. You'd think to yourself, I should use the first aid kit, but then you don't. And that makes it an idle/responsive thought, because nothing happens as a result of you having had that thought. The thought never left your consciousness. It never came into the physical world as an action. There is another kind of responsive thought that does produce action though. But this kind of thought comes from the subconscious. This is when somebody throws a ball at your head. And now I'm going to stop here for a quick interlude. I'll come back to this topic after this. If you'll take a look around at this area here, you'll realize that this is the area where I originally manifested in this place 27 days ago. And that abortion there, I believe, was my first kill. It's been almost a month since I just popped into existence just up the paddock a bit. Before that happened, I was in the process of rolling back to my home clan over a temporal swing permeation. This would have been around the equivalent year of 2085. And I say equivalent year because we don't record time and dates where I come from. All of our mentors say the same thing. Survival is essential. History is, at best, just interesting. Besides, after the black hole and comet event had redefined our moon, the Earth wasn't left unaffected. It had been moved further out in its orbit around the Sun, which means its orbital speed is slower. A year is now 394.2 days, so any date keeping is either going to need some sort of a sliding scale to measure, or we just throw out the old calendar and start an entirely new one. Someone may get round to it someday in the future, but I'll never know, because I know full well that the situation that I'm in here is a one-way event. There is no going back home for me, because I am Hichory Diamond, phenomenal gaming character of grassybeans. My only real consolation is that I'm fairly certain that I know approximately where and when I am. I know for certain that I am still on Earth, because the field of the temporal swing only reaches around 71,000 kilometers into space. It's not capable of sending me anywhere else. I don't know exactly, but I can make a pretty well-educated guess as to where and when this place is. There are clearly no other normal people around like me, but there are regular airdrops. That suggests that it's shortly after the terminal war. There are other things that confirm this, things like stashes in the hollow stumps. That's something that everybody did for a time after the war. And another way I can place this time is the condition of the buildings. The war ended abruptly when the comet slammed into the moon. The hell that rained down on Earth at that time was far worse than man's pathetic atomic bombs and biological warfare. Once that mess finally settled down, there was very little life left remaining on the Earth. None of the towns or buildings have been touched since. So by the simple fact that the buildings aren't showing any signs of weathering, I calculate that it's about 2 to 3 years after the war. In my time, these buildings still exist. They're just a lot more run down. Nature has started to reclaim man's marvels of engineering. Forests now grow in the cities, lush flowering vines creep through house windows and doors, while the lowest forms of life, the funguses and mushrooms, slowly digest the things that civilization revered as their most indestructible crowning achievements. All of the big cities and skyscrapers, all the roads, the bridges and the tunnels, even the underground bunkers that were supposed to be the fortresses of safety for the wealthy and the self-proclaimed important people, nothing, absolutely nothing could protect anyone from that final conflagration event. It's a story that we hear regularly in great detail. Our mentors relive the events constantly. To them it's like a tormenting nightmare that gestates in their quiet, unguarded moments and ambushes them when they least expect it. But it's a torment that clearly still vexes them all. They survived only because of the S-plasma. There were also a number of pre-war wealthy people who survived as well. No one knows how they made it through, but they did. I'm telling you this because there is another whole story attached to that situation. For now, just know that some of the oligarchy survived. And now I had so much more I wanted to slobber in your ear about, but it looks like the end of the video is approaching. But not to worry, I will dominate the talking some other time. And until then, I've been Hichory Gold and Diamond, and this has been an eye-rolling drudgery. I love you. I do. Salsac, share and like, subscribe and comment, or prepare to die. You have 7 days.